In the dimly lit county auction house just outside Missoula, Montana, time seemed to slow as a scarred German shepherd lay motionless on the cold, concrete floor. His once proud military posture had faded, and whispers of mockery filled the air. This was not just a dog, this was a forgotten hero. As the crowd's laughter echoed, a figure stood up from the back row. Ethan Walker, a worn Marine Corps veteran, stepped forward, his face half hidden in shadow. His voice, steady but haunted, cut through the mockery. "I'll take him," he declared. The room fell silent. This moment would change everything. Before you start, please leave a comment with your location and hit the like button to show your support for more stories like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Ethan Walker was a man marked by battles, both on the field and within himself. At 34 years old, he had seen more than his fair share of violence and loss, his body and mind worn by years of military service. A former Marine, he returned from Afghanistan 3 years ago, but the scars of war had not left him. His hands, calloused and rough, betrayed a lifetime of physical labor, but it was his distant, haunted gaze that spoke volumes. Ethan had inherited a small ranch in Montana from his grandfather, a peaceful, quiet place away from the world. Yet, it had become more of a prison than a sanctuary. He spent his days in solitude, tending to the few horses left on the property, the rhythm of farm life, a temporary distraction from the storm raging in his mind. Ethan's nights were a different story. Cold sweats and nightmares would wake him, dragging memories of combat into the present. The VA office called regularly, their voices echoing in his empty home, offering medications he never took, counseling he ignored. The world had written him off, labeling him as damaged, just another soldier who couldn't make the transition back to civilian life. But deep inside, Ethan still craved purpose, a reason to feel needed again. He didn't. Rex, once known as a proud military dog, lay at the center of the auction house, his lifeless eyes betraying a history of unspeakable pain. His coat, once sleek and strong, was now dull and thin, revealing the toll of years spent in combat and under harsh training methods. The scars on his body spoke of brutal conditioning, inflicted by Major Harrison, a man whose methods were as merciless as they were controversial. In his prime, Rex had been a force to be reckoned with. He had served in some of the most dangerous military operations, his keen senses and sharp instincts saving countless lives. But that was before the betrayal, before the day he was pushed too far. Rex had done what any loyal soldier would do. He had disobeyed an order, a decision that ultimately cost him his dignity. Labeled as unstable after refusing to follow a dangerous command that would have risked lives, Rex became a casualty of a system that valued obedience over survival. Now, standing at the auction, Rex had no name, no purpose, just a label, damaged goods. But his eyes, though clouded with fear and confusion, held something deeper, a memory, a spark. It was a look Ethan knew all too well, a look of a broken soul searching for redemption. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to find healing in each other. The auctioneer's voice droned on, dismissing Rex as if he were just another broken object to be discarded. "Starting bid at $50, he announced, barely glancing at the dog in the center of the room. The crowd chuckled, their eyes filled with judgment. "Damaged goods," one man muttered. Another added, "No training left in him." Rex's dull, vacant gaze swept over the room, his body still but tense, every inch of him reflecting a history of trauma. Ethan stood in the back, his heart pounding. He hadn't planned on being here today, but the words in the local paper had haunted him. Former military dog, aggressive, no training, final auction before euthanasia. The phrase, final auction, felt like a punch to his gut. He could feel the dog's pain through the air, the silent cries for help that matched his own. He recognized the look in Rex's eyes. It was the same one he saw every morning when he faced the mirror. Without thinking, Ethan pushed past the row of seats, his boots clapping on the concrete floor. The laughter around him faded into a muffled hum as he walked toward the auctioneer. The moment his voice cut through the mockery, the room fell silent. "I'll take him," Ethan said, his voice steady yet filled with a raw emotion that surprised even him. The auctioneer blinked, and the crowd was still. This was more than a bid. It was the beginning of something far deeper. Ethan stepped forward, his boots echoing in the otherwise silent room. Rex didn't move, but Ethan could feel the tension radiating off the dog. His instincts told him to be patient, not to rush, but the moment felt urgent. This was the only chance Rex had left. The auctioneer handed Ethan a worn leather leash, his hands shaking slightly as if the transaction itself unsettled him. "Be careful," he muttered. "He's unpredictable. You'll need a muzzle." But Ethan barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the dog. Rex's scarred body was a testament to the brutality of his past, but it was the emptiness in his eyes that tore at Ethan's heart. Slowly, Ethan crouched, maintaining a careful distance. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "I'm Ethan. I'm not going to hurt you." Rex's eyes flickered, a brief spark of recognition before they dulled again. Ethan stayed perfectly still, trying to convey a sense of safety, of understanding. For a moment, there was nothing, just the two of them, separated by distance and pain. Then, in an instant, Rex lunged. Teeth bared, he snapped toward Ethan's throat, and the room gasped. But instead of recoiling, Ethan remained calm, unmoving, his gaze locked with the dog's. Something passed between them, a shared understanding of fear, of violence, of being broken. Rex stopped, inches from Ethan's neck, and slowly backed away. The room was still. Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. He hadn't just gained a dog, he'd gained a partner. Before watching, don't forget to leave a comment about where you're watching from, and hit the subscribe button for more captivating stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. As Ethan drove Rex back to the ranch, the dog sat silently in the truck, his body tense, eyes darting as if he expected danger around every corner. The brief interaction at the auction house had been a small victory, but it was just the beginning of a much deeper journey. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Rex's past was tied to his own. Both of them veterans, both of them scarred, both of them lost. The local veterinarian, Claire Thompson, had been monitoring Rex's condition for weeks before Ethan's arrival. She had seen the signs of trauma. Physically, Rex had been battered by the rigors of military life, but it was his psychological wounds that ran deeper. According to the paperwork Claire had managed to obtain, Rex had been part of several covert missions in Afghanistan. He had been hailed as a hero, saving countless lives with his sharp senses and loyalty. But that was before Major Harrison took over the military dog training program. Harrison's training methods were notoriously brutal, designed to break a dog's will and make them completely submissive to orders. Claire had tried to intervene when Rex's condition worsened, but her efforts were blocked by the endless red tape of military bureaucracy. Rex had been pushed beyond his limits, forced to endure hours of grueling training, and when he finally snapped, when he refused a command that would have put lives at risk, he was deemed unstable and scheduled for euthanasia. Ethan could see it now, the coldness of the military system that had discarded a soldier, a dog like Rex, simply because he had shown some sign of independence. Ethan understood that pain, the sting of being cast aside by the very system that once relied on you. This wasn't just about Rex, it was about both of them, fighting to heal from wounds that ran deep. Ethan had never truly returned from war. The small Montana ranch, with its quiet mornings and wide-open spaces, was supposed to be his escape, but instead it felt like a cage. The soothing rhythm of caring for horses, feeding the chickens, and maintaining the land only distracted him from the darkness that had taken root inside. He had inherited the ranch from his grandfather, a man who had worked the land with pride. But now, it was nothing more than an empty reminder of a life Ethan felt he had left behind long ago. The nights were the hardest. Each one was an endless replay of the horrors he had witnessed in Afghanistan. His comrades lost, the innocent lives caught in the crossfire, and the feeling of helplessness that gnawed at him. The VA had tried to help, of course, but their attempts felt like nothing more than a formality. Medication, therapy, it all felt like band-aids on wounds too deep to heal. He couldn't talk to anyone. No one understood. His wife had left shortly after his return, unable to cope with the man he had become. And his friends, they were scattered, just like the pieces of his life that no longer seemed to fit together. He had tried to push through, to force himself into normalcy, but it wasn't working. Every morning, he woke up and went through the motions, only to feel the same emptiness eating away at him. That was until he saw Rex. The moment Ethan looked into the eyes of the German Shepherd at the auction, he knew this was not just a dog in need of a home. This was a kindred spirit, a broken warrior just like him. Something in Rex's pain mirrored his own, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, healing was still possible for both of them. Ethan's first few days with Rex were challenging, to say the least. The dog refused to enter the barn that Ethan had prepared for him. Every attempt to coax him inside resulted in a stiffening of Rex's body, his eyes wild with fear, his body shaking as if anticipating punishment. Ethan's patience was tested, but he knew he couldn't rush this. Rex's trauma ran deep, far deeper than anything he had encountered in his own life, and it would take time to rebuild trust. Enter Claire Thompson, the local veterinarian, who had been following Rex's case since he was first brought to the auction house. Claire was a soft-spoken, kind-hearted woman, but there was a fire in her eyes when it came to animals, especially those who had served in the military. She had tried for weeks to intervene on Rex's behalf, but had been blocked at every turn by the military's bureaucracy. When she saw that Ethan had taken Rex home, she offered her help, not just as a vet, but as someone who understood the unique bond between a dog and his handler. Together, Ethan and Claire began the slow and difficult process of rehabilitation. Claire's first task was to examine Rex's injuries. His ribs were bruised, his joints stiff from years of overwork, and his coat dull from neglect. But what struck her the most was the look in Rex's eyes. The same empty, haunted look Ethan saw in the mirror every day. Rex was a dog in need of more than just medical care. He needed emotional healing, and that would take time, patience, and the unwavering commitment of someone who understood pain. Ethan, for the first time in years, felt like he was doing something worthwhile. As the days passed, Ethan and Claire worked tirelessly to build a routine for Rex, but progress came in slow, painful increments. Ethan spent hours sitting outside the barn, speaking gently to Rex, waiting for the dog to approach. But each time he tried to get closer, Rex would back away, growling low, his eyes full of mistrust. It was as if the dog had resigned himself to the idea that no matter how much love he received, there would always be a hidden cost. Betrayal was too deeply etched into his soul. The first time Rex refused to eat, Ethan felt a pang of frustration. It wasn't just about food. It was about breaking through the emotional barriers that Rex had built to protect himself from the world. "Come on, boy," Ethan murmured, placing a bowl of food in front of Rex. "You need to eat. You're safe here." But Rex merely stared at the bowl, then turned his back to it, retreating further into the corner of the yard. Ethan's patience began to wear thin, though he never showed it. He was a soldier, trained to endure, but this was different. He wasn't battling an enemy he could defeat. Rex's trauma wasn't something that could be vanquished with a single act of strength or force. Rex wasn't just an animal in need of care. He was a broken soul, a victim of a system that had chewed him up and spit him out, much like Ethan himself. Claire observed the growing tension and offered her advice, gently reminding Ethan that Rex's fear wasn't just about his past abuse, it was about his need to feel in control. They needed to earn his trust, not demand it. "You've been where he is," Claire said, her voice soft but firm. "Both of you are fighting the same battle." Ethan nodded, but he couldn't help feeling the weight of the growing burden. It was one quiet afternoon when Claire returned with news that would change everything. She had managed to track down a few pieces of Rex's military records, though most were heavily redacted. Still, what she had uncovered struck Ethan like a punch to the gut. The truth was much darker than he had anticipated. Rex had been part of a critical reconnaissance mission in Afghanistan, one that Ethan's unit had been involved in. Claire had uncovered a fragment of the report that detailed Rex's actions during the mission. The dog had saved Ethan's team, had detected an ambush before it even occurred, and led the unit to safety. But instead of being rewarded for his instincts and bravery, Rex had been punished. Major Harrison, who had been in charge of Rex's training, had ordered the dog forward, even when Rex had shown signs of distress. Rex, unable to follow the command to put his life at risk for no reason, had disobeyed. And for that, he had been labeled unstable. His records altered to cover up his disobedience. As Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents, everything fell into place. Rex hadn't failed. He had saved lives. But instead of praise, he had been discarded. his worth judged by a system that valued obedience above survival. Rex had been betrayed, just like Ethan had been. Ethan felt a surge of anger not just for Rex, but for himself. He'd been discarded too, sent home to fight his own battles with no help, no understanding. The revelation hit hard. It wasn't just a dog who had been wronged, it was Ethan too. Their fates were intertwined in a system that broke them both. Now, Ethan knew he couldn't stop. They had to fight for Rex's justice, just like they had to fight for their own. Ethan's hands trembled as he put the last of Rex's military records down on the table. The documents were filled with unsettling details, and yet, there was still so much missing, so many blacked-out sections, so much left to be hidden. But even what was visible was enough to ignite a fire inside him. Rex had been a hero, but to the system, he was nothing more than a casualty of war. A piece of military equipment discarded once it had outlived its usefulness. The anger that Ethan had buried for years, ever since his own return from Afghanistan, boiled to the surface. The betrayal he felt now was not only for Rex but for himself and for the countless other soldiers and dogs who had been discarded by the very system they served. As much as he had tried to leave his past behind, it had come roaring back, tangled with Rex's fate. Claire, seeing the shift in Ethan, cautiously placed a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, we can't let this go. You know it's wrong. It's time to confront them." Ethan nodded, his voice cold. "I need to talk to Harrison. We need to expose him. What he did to Rex, what he's still doing, it's all part of a bigger problem. He's got to be stopped." But confronting Harrison would mean risking everything: his reputation, his place in the veteran community, his safety. Harrison wasn't just a man, he was a symbol of the corruption that ran deep within the military's handling of working dogs. Ethan knew he couldn't back down. This was no longer about just saving Rex, it was about exposing the lies, bringing justice to the forgotten heroes, and fighting for what was right. The only question now was whether he had the strength to confront the man who had betrayed them both. This character truly deserves a like, but sadly they haven't received it yet. Let's show our appreciation for their incredible journey and the lessons we've learned from their story. The storm hit without warning, dark clouds rolling in over the Montana mountains, the air heavy with tension. Ethan had been sitting on the porch, trying to gather his thoughts, when the first crack of thunder sounded. Rex, who had been lying quietly near the barn, immediately went rigid. Ethan stood, his heart tightening as the dog's reaction mirrored a familiar panic. The same panic he himself felt whenever the memories of war came rushing back. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, but Rex's eyes were wide with fear. The storm was no longer just a thunderstorm. It was an assault on Rex's mind, a trigger for memories of explosions, gunfire, and the chaos of Afghanistan. The dog's breathing quickened, and before Ethan could reach him, Rex bolted. "Rex!" Ethan shouted, his heart pounding in his chest as the dog disappeared into the darkness of the yard, running as if fleeing a battle. The storm intensified, the rain pouring down in sheets, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and ran after the dog. Through the torrential rain and flashing lightning, Ethan chased Rex down the muddy paths, calling his name, but the dog was too fast, too frightened. The distance between them grew with each stride. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't lose him now, not after everything they had been through together. They had both been running from their pasts for so long, and now it seemed as if both were about to be swallowed up by it. The storm raged on, and Ethan's breath grew more desperate. This was more than just a chase. This was a fight for both their survival. Ethan's heart pounded as he chased Rex through the relentless storm. The rain soaked him to the bone, his boots sinking in the mud, but he didn't stop. Rex was ahead, a blur of fear and panic, his paws pounding against the earth as if trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. The storm's fury seemed to mirror the chaos inside the dog's mind, the memories of war that had never let go. Then, just as the rain seemed to reach its peak, Ethan saw it. A flash of light, a burst of orange through the darkness. The barn was on fire. Thick black smoke billowed into the air, and flames licked at the side of the building. "Rex!" Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the crackle of the flames and the roar of the storm. Rex was already at the barn, his body trembling but still moving, as if drawn by an instinct that Ethan could barely understand. Without hesitation, Rex lunged into the smoke-filled barn, disappearing inside. Ethan froze, his body screaming in protest, but his heart knew what he had to do. No, Rex. He pushed forward, but the dog had already made his choice. The barn was a death trap, but Rex, just like Ethan once had chosen to go back in, to save what he could, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Finally, as the fire grew worse, Ethan spotted Rex's silhouette, emerging from the smoke, two smaller dogs in tow. But just as Rex reached the door, a burning beam collapsed, cutting him off from the exit. Ethan's chest tightened. Rex had saved them, but at what cost? The dog collapsed just yards from safety, his breathing labored, the fire having taken its toll. Ethan reached him just in time to see Rex's eyes flicker one last time. This wasn't just a sacrifice. This was loyalty, unbroken even in the face of death. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. We're dedicated to sharing meaningful, thought-provoking content that inspires and entertains. Your support will help us continue creating powerful stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our community. The fire had been extinguished, but the wreckage remained, both in the barn and in Ethan's heart. Rex had given everything to save the other dogs, but it wasn't enough. He had fought against the flames with the kind of selflessness that only a soldier could understand, yet the price was steep. Rex lay unconscious, battered by smoke and burns, his body too broken to keep fighting. Ethan sat by his side, his hands trembling as he wiped away the blood from Rex's fur, knowing deep down that the fight was far from over. The fire had been an attempt to destroy the evidence, an attempt to cover up what had been done to Rex and others like him. But the truth was coming to light, and Ethan wasn't going to let it be buried. The following morning, Claire arrived with shocking news. She had used her connections to dig deeper into the military records, and what she uncovered sent a chill through Ethan's veins. Major Harrison, the man who had overseen Rex's brutal training, was involved in a massive cover-up. The dogs that had failed to comply with Harrison's methods were systematically eliminated, their stories erased from military history. Harrison had orchestrated it all: the abuse, the deaths, the lies. Ethan's fists clenched. It wasn't just Rex who had been betrayed. It was an entire system of soldiers, human and canine, discarded for not conforming. The truth was finally being revealed, and Ethan wasn't going to let Harrison get away with it. As the weight of the truth settled over Ethan, his resolve hardened. The fire had been a desperate attempt to silence Rex, to erase the evidence of the crimes committed under Harrison's command. But the truth had a way of creeping to the surface, and it was now undeniable. Harrison's actions were no longer just hidden in the shadows. They were out in the open, and Ethan wasn't going to let them go unnoticed. Claire, with her quiet determination, had contacted every ally she could find: veterans, animal rights activists, and even some military insiders. The more they dug, the more people came forward. Each new revelation about Harrison's brutality sent shockwaves through the community, and the pieces started to fall into place. Rex's suffering wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of corruption and abuse. Word spread quickly, and the local community rallied behind Ethan. Veterans who had served with him, neighbors who had heard about Rex's transformation, all came together. The voices of those who had been silenced for so long grew louder. They stood by Ethan and Rex, demanding justice not just for one dog, but for every one of the forgotten heroes. The fight was just beginning, but now Ethan wasn't alone. The confrontation with Major Harrison was inevitable. Ethan and Rex, now bonded beyond words, stood together, ready to face the man who had caused so much pain. The community had rallied behind them, and the evidence was mounting, but Harrison still held power, his influence reaching far into the military establishment. It was at a public hearing that Ethan finally came face to face with Harrison. The room was tense, filled with military officials, veterans, and even a few journalists. Harrison stood tall, trying to maintain his composure, but Ethan saw through the facade. Behind his calm exterior was a man desperate to protect the empire he had built on cruelty. "You think you can take me down, Walker?" Harrison sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is bigger than you, than any of you." Ethan didn't flinch. "It's over," he said, his voice firm. "You're done." With Rex by his side, Ethan laid out the truth for all to hear: the abuse, the cover-ups, the lies. Harrison's empire of manipulation crumbled in the face of justice. Ethan had not only fought for Rex's freedom, but for every dog, every soldier who had been cast aside and forgotten. This was the end of the line for Harrison. The aftermath of the hearing was nothing short of transformative. Major Harrison was arrested, and the full extent of his crimes was exposed, leading to sweeping changes within the military's treatment of working dogs. Ethan and Rex had won, more than just a battle for one dog, but for all the forgotten heroes who had suffered in silence. As the months passed, the ranch that Ethan had inherited became a sanctuary, not just for him and Rex, but for many others. It was transformed into a rehabilitation center for retired military dogs, a place where they could heal, both physically and emotionally. The bond between Ethan and Rex, born out of shared trauma, became the foundation of a new mission. A mission to provide a second chance for the dogs who had been discarded and abused. Rex, now fully recovered, became a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the healing power of love and patience. Ethan found purpose once again, not just as a soldier, but as a protector. Together, they helped veterans and dogs alike fight, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal with understanding and compassion. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of peace. The fight had been worth it, and together, they would continue to fight for those who needed them most. If you love this story, please hit the subscribe button to support our team and share this video with your friends and family. We'd love for you to engage by leaving a comment below, sharing your thoughts, and telling us if you'd like to hear more in part 2. Your support means the world to us, and it encourages us to create more content that resonates with you. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your feedback and engagement help us continue this journey together. Thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to hearing from you.